I was simply lucky to find a way to solve it. And so I thought I started a career as a software developer, but then relatively quickly my boss said, you know, we have some problems to solve in distribution, and I guess I had just a good relationship with people, and so I fixed that. Similar to the code, I fixed the distribution problem that we had with the distributors that we worked for, and in almost no time I became distributor manager. And I realized that the distribution business is pretty much convoluted. So large distributors or wholesale distributors sell directly to end users, they sell to resellers, to dealers, they sell to everybody, and also compete with everybody. And I thought, this is strange. I mean, if they would be more stringent with their sales strategy, you know, distribution would be much more successful. I told my boss, you know, we need to fix this. We need to tell the distributors that we don't sell direct anymore, just through the channels we see are relevant for them, for our products. And he was laughing, and he said, "Axel, you're crazy. This is a 5,000-year-old business. I mean, it goes all the way back to Egypt and the caravans, you know, Rome, so to speak, the dunes, and you cannot change this." And I was so sure it must work, but I was very frustrated. But then I still decided to do that, and people thought, actually, I mean, you cannot do this. I mean, this is a global network of dealer and business relationships. But I didn't care. I was 26, and so with that age, you don't care at all. And so we were almost bankrupt 6 months later because nobody trusted this actually works. Even the resellers didn't trust. I mean, they were the biggest beneficiary. So we barely made it. 2 years later, we were again almost bankrupt because the growth was so high that we couldn't finance the growth. You know, in the distribution business, you have to basically have a warehouse, and you buy the stuff before, and then you sell it, and in between you have to finance it. So we were close to actually shut down, and we just had one big deal, and this was BASF, the chemical company, and I told them that we're in trouble, we're just not able to fulfill the order unless they can help us with extended payment deals. And from them we needed to get payment right away. And they said, no, we've never done this with any company, but I heard so much about you guys, it's okay. And so we got the cash basically in when we delivered the products, and then 10 years later we were at $5 billion in revenue, and the third largest tech distributor in the world out of 8,000. And I say this because everything we did was theoretically impossible. I mean, everybody said, you know, you cannot do this, this is impossible, and here you see you're almost bankrupt and so forth. But at the end it worked out. And I say this because you will run into these issues with almost 100% certainty. So when you start a business, just wait for the moments where you think you hit the wall. And I learned over time, you know, when you hit the wall, at this very moment, you actually have still, you know, a couple options to navigate around, and this is what a real entrepreneur actually makes. Next company we started was in the web business, and I didn't want to have the regular, normal investment mechanisms like VCs. Not that I didn't like it, actually we had, because we were very successful, obviously, VCs came, I mean, pretty much right away when we started something new. But one day, this was, I mean, in the very early days, Marita told me, and we started all the companies together, by the way, she said she had experience with a very different way of fundraising by actually selling stakes in hotels. And so she raised 30 million. And I thought, gosh, if you can raise 30 million that way, why don't we try this? And so we built a web page where investors could actually register, tell us how much they want to invest based on the valuation we made, and we raised the first online equity round in no time. And this worked so well that we became actually the first online equity trading platform. Back then, this was illegal. And the stock exchange came to us and said, hey guys, you need to stop this, this is illegal. And I asked my lawyer, so what do you have to do to make it legal? Obviously, I didn't want to do anything illegal. And he said, you know what, there is no illegal at this stage. The stock exchange doesn't have any kind of laws that describe that this is illegal. So I talked to the stock exchange and said, you know what, let's meet in person because I need to know what we need to do to make it legal rather than shutting it down. And the manager of this whole group was a lady, and she said, okay, Mr. Schultz, yeah, let's sit down. I have to admit that we don't have a legal framework yet, but we need to stop it because, you know, you may do this in a positive spirit, but people may just copy you and do this and just, you know, rape people basically with stupid ideas. And I understood and said, okay. And so we got a 1 year grace period while she did the legal framework for equity crowdfunding, and we helped them. And we then, obviously, because we were aware of the process, so we made it actually a legal platform back then. Then 2000 was the internet bubble burst and everything crashed, and so we were lucky to sell basically that crowdfunding platform. So I started that way so that you realize there's all kinds of obstacles. And all kinds of obstacles are always in cases where you do something completely new. And completely new means, in most cases, disruptive, but at least innovative. And we differentiate innovative with something newer than it was in the past, something that nobody else has yet. And disruptive is if you do something completely new, meaning processes, business models, everything is different than in the past, then it becomes disruptive. And we took a long time until we finally could coordinate in our brain how do we actually teach disruption. As I talked to my friends, this was in San Francisco, so we lived there 20 years, and so Dave McClure, the founder from 500 Startups, we sat down together and said, so how do we formulate disruptive and how do we teach it? And he said, you know, you can't teach it because every disruptive business is so new, so out of the ordinary that there is no model to teach new. If you can teach it, then it's not new anymore. And so we worked back and forth, and we said, well, we need to help, you know, people like you to build, for instance, a disruptive business model. And it took me probably 5 years to come up with a concept that teaches how to do something out of the ordinary without telling you what to do, because if I would know what you do and I would have a solution, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary anymore. So it's an interesting conflict that we begin to have in our world, because the farther we get with disruptions, the less likely it is that you can have any kind of support. And with that said, everything I want to tell you today, take it with a grain of salt. I mean, everything we did was in the past. Everything you do is in the future. And what we did was, in almost any case, whatever I did was so, relatively speaking, new and disruptive that people told me this is impossible. And I think that impossible is really something that triggers me to do, because if something seems to be impossible, it's obviously very interesting to try out. And when something is impossible, but you can think it, when you think, you see that solution in your imaginary world in the brain, then there's this saying, if you can think it, you can make it. And I think this is a critical understanding, that if you think this would be possible, and you have sort of an idea how it works, then follow that thought. Even though it is completely irrational and completely stupid and whatever, but that is the fabric of new products in the future. So now I wonder if I have, so, and what I'm doing here, I can get sort of the what is it, presentation going? Coming? What I'm doing here is also impossible because you see here is 1 out of 96 slides. You know this saying death by PowerPoint. So I don't want to do that. But what I wasn't able to do is, this is a 3-day workshop actually. I wasn't able to cram it into one morning. So what I decided to do is I just skip a couple slides that are not super relevant. So let me start with the innovation paradigm. This is something we put together in the World Innovations Forum, and it should also help you in a way to think of innovation. I mean, there are scientists, there are reviewers, there are politicians, everybody thinks about innovation. How can we get more innovative? And I realized that with the exception of some people in Silicon Valley, innovation equals new products. That's the most popular thinking in the rest of the world. And this is even supported by everybody else because it seems logical that if you're creating a new product that's innovative, and if it's innovative, this is easy to sell, and if it's easy to sell and innovative, it makes a lot of profit. And if there are many innovative companies with many innovative products in a country, the country prospers. But if you look at the complete cycle, then you'll see, here's the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur, typically young people like you guys, need capital. So part of innovation, to really get it up to fly, it needs capital. Then there is a good idea if you have some supporters, whether it's mentors, coaches, co-working spaces like this. These things are important for an innovation ecosystem. Then we have the government, which is equally critical because, I mean, we're visiting many countries. There are some countries that they don't have a stock exchange. And if you don't have a stock exchange, these guys here cannot get their money back in an IPO. They can only get the money back if they sell the company at the right point in time. The right point in time typically is after 3 or 4 years. If you're at the point where in 3 or 4 years after you started, you're turning revenue, you're getting profitable, you have kind of a nice sale, then Google comes and says, here's 20 million. You say, what? 20 million? Oh, gone, yeah, give me the money. But for the country, this is a zero-sum game. The country doesn't gain anything. The country in that stage actually paid for all the development indirectly, then you sell it to another country, and the other country makes the actual real money when the value chain comes into full swing, when it becomes a billion-dollar company. But nobody here in Vietnam would have anything about that. So which means the country, or the company, or the government need to provide the infrastructure that entrepreneurship works, investment works, education works, and then the company can grow, the company can actually go all the way up to an IPO. And if we look at California, the real trick in California has absolutely nothing to do with innovative products. Absolutely nothing. Nobody realizes this until you live in that state. If you close your eyes and think about the product Facebook. Who's using Facebook, by the way, just to get sort of an idea? Some of you, pretty much everybody. Okay. Now, when you turn it on, you go into Facebook, you do the thing. You don't even think or look, what kind of innovative product is Facebook? This blue thing, developed in 2004, looks today pretty much the same like 2006, 2007, more than 10 years old. This blue thing, you have still the little icons. I mean, the whole UI looks like an old product. And it is that old. Innovation, yeah, this was innovative in 2004. Now we have 2019. That's 15 years ago. And other than optimization, so that it runs with 2 billion people, the product itself is still the same. And if you go through some of these super innovative products, you you actually would wonder if you step back and really analyze what is the innovation in that product. You will be surprised how little innovation is there. But part of the innovation cycle is if this works out down here, if this is where we are, this is where the logo actually comes from, this is the point of inception or invention, and in this point, the innovation itself has, believe it or not, no value. But when the product is built and you have the first users and so forth, then you create a first value. When you go into production and drive progress and prosperity through export, this is when it really jumps. And so export is the biggest and most important thing about innovation. Innovation becomes valuable when you export it. So let me ask you, who of you are in the engineering side of the entrepreneur's world? Just a few. So the rest, who is on the business side of this world? And the rest is in no world, I guess. Okay. But sort of the more people seems to be on the business side, so that's cool. Because one of the problems that we face worldwide, including Silicon Valley, is that most of the startups are completely tech-loaded and have no business background and no business co-founder. So for those of you who are a single founder on the tech side, look for a co-founder. And this co-founder needs to be on the business/financial side, and vice versa. So if you get this full circle, then you realize the most innovative products that we have today are actually relatively old, and you realize that they're not technically very innovative. If we think of Uber, for instance, there has been lots of taxi apps before Uber. Uber is zero technology innovation. Uber is purely business plan innovation. The way they run the business is extremely different from any other taxi app. Because taxi apps, most taxi apps basically mimic what's going on in the taxi world. Okay, I need to have a taxi. Then they made the connection to the old taxi center, brings the taxi. I mean, everything is old world. And they only improved it a little bit. But Uber, I mean, when Travis thought of the taxi world, Travis, the CEO of Uber, he thought we need to control, alt, delete everything in our brain about taxis and start from scratch. And so the message, and I will talk to this about a couple more times, is that we need to differentiate between disruptive business model and disruptive technology. And we need to come to realization that disruptive business model is the key to the ultimate success. Now for those who love the technology and the product, this is bad news because this is what people love in this case. But the real success of a company, the success of a population, the success of a country comes from export and from real drivers on the business side model. And also these guys here, the capital side of the world, these are most likely business people and they invest in a business. An investor doesn't typically invest in technology. And particularly if an angel investor looks at this, angel investors look at the technology side, realize, okay, there is some, it sounds good, it looks good, but they also know in 6 to 9 months from now or in 2 years from now, everything that you build looks probably entirely different. The only thing they want to make sure is that the foundation is kind of robust. But if there's no business model associated with deep knowledge about the market, the users, the problems you are solving and so on, they are less likely to invest. And so I was talking a lot with startups that moved to the States. We had, I think, almost every week, we had tours coming to our co-working space where we were at a company, as a company, and people said, oh yeah, this is the Blue Roads guys, and I need to talk to them as well. They believed that the reason to go to California and to Silicon Valley is because of the investors. And yes, there are tons of investors, but they would not, if invest in you if you haven't gotten money here. It wouldn't be different over there. And the only thing is you'll learn very, very quickly what you have to do to attract investors. And then when I was, this was a couple of years ago, I was in Berlin and I met an investor, a German investor. We were just about to come back from Silicon Valley. And somebody who introduced me to this event knew that I'm going to invest in startups, and he said, you need to meet Mr. Young. Mr. Young is an investor, is a German guy, and maybe you can, compare notes and invest together. And so he told me that he's investing also in German startups, but mostly in Californian startups. So I thought, this is strange. So he's a German, doesn't invest a lot in German companies, but in US companies. He may make a gain, but honestly for the country this is of no value. And now here comes the irony. And I said, so how do you do that? I mean they are far away, so you cannot review, every startup you invest. I say, no. I'm investing in a fund. There's an interesting company called Angels Forum, and they have a fund, and so I invest in the fund, and that fund invests in very good startups. I started laughing. I said, okay, this is really funny now. We, German, couldn't get funded in Germany with our idea. So we moved to Silicon Valley, we got funded, now guess from whom? From the Angels Forum and the Halo Fund, where Mr. Young from Germany actually invested. So he wouldn't invest in us in Germany, but through a fund actually indirectly in Silicon Valley. So the economics is this way. People from the rest of the world, including Vietnam, invest not here, but in California, even though this might be Vietnamese startups who went from here to California. So this is pretty strange. But there is one rationale. The training in the US, in Silicon Valley, is superior. What I learned is amazing. And the reason why I'm here today is I want to stop this stupid cycle. Because economically, if we could have all countries in the world who are trying to be innovative, keeping the innovation in the country, all these countries could thrive. And instead of having 10 or 15 developed countries and maybe 30 emerging countries and more than 100 of less developed countries, we could actually go to 50 or 100 developed countries and the rest may be emerging countries. The world would be entirely different. If we have innovative countries, pretty much all over the world, humanity would look very, very different. And so this cycle came up. Here's a list. You may want to look at this list. This is on Wikipedia. It's export volume per capita. And the interesting thing about this list is when you look at the countries, you can read it, but you see it on Wikipedia. And you look at the country flags, you see, okay, the most wealthy countries are on the very top, and the most poor countries are on the very bottom. So export volume per capita is equal to prosperity. So when you make it in Vietnam to become a successful company, stay here in the country and export whatever you have. This is the biggest contributor to the country. If you go away, this is a loss. Now, just to get a vague idea about how important you guys here are for your nation. In every country the same. We have an average 0.007% of the population are entrepreneurs. It's a tiny, tiny fraction. Now look at Germany. It's one of the richest countries. When you look where this wealth comes from, it comes from people like a Mr. Siemens and a Mr. Daimler, a Mr. Bosch, a Mr. Volkswagen, and so forth. And you see that there's about 100 companies that were founded about 100 to 120 years ago, from about 100 entrepreneurs. It's almost, the size like we have here, made the entire economy of Germany happening the way it is today. So entrepreneurs have a gigantic leverage you only don't know yet. But when you look into the history and also into the current state, we entrepreneurs are the drivers of any economy wherever we are. And if we leave, that's bad. If we come back, that's good. And actually it started when a German entrepreneur was standing up in front of me and said, "Axel, you know, we did an event like this in San Francisco." And he said, "You know, it's amazing. I mean, what we learn from you is great, yada, yada, yada. But you are guilty for not having the same situation in Germany because you didn't come back. I mean, you got here and now you help California companies to be successful." And that really hit me. And so, as our kids went back, you know, we went back to them. So the only reason why I do this now worldwide is I believe, you know, we could do even better if we have that understanding in every country. So export sources, innovation drives the biggest profits, of course. And there are a couple sources. Natural resources like oil or gold or coal, or production power. That is something where most countries get their economy or their profits from. Then the second one is innovation, particularly 75 years or so ago. These are the richest countries. And last but not least, innovation from today. These are the richest countries in the future. And then there are obviously countries who do not export anything. But it was very clear to me that the export component, even though, I mean, it sounds so old. I mean, to me, I had the hardest time saying, what, export, is this important? Well, yes, it is. I mean, for an economy, that's where wealth comes from. Now, exporting innovation, this is where the real wealth comes from, because this is really wealthy. And the export from putting something out of the ground has an end, because at some point in time, oil is no longer available. The only other export is still the good old agricultural export. So you guys export shrimp, right? And it's funny, we were discussing this by coincidence yesterday. And I may tell the story real quick because it may sort of amuse you. So we were, about a year ago, we were buying shrimps in a supermarket in Switzerland, or we were looking for, and we saw these big prawns, and they were from Vietnam. And I thought, from Vietnam? I don't know, I mean, until they come to Switzerland, I mean, they must be bad. And so we didn't buy them. And a couple of weeks later, by accident, we were in a restaurant, and they offered Vietnamese shrimps. And I thought, wow, I mean, if they even write it down, so that must be something good. And it was a very good restaurant, and they were excellent. They were really, really good. Ever since we buy Vietnamese shrimps. But, yeah, probably from you.
Thank you.
So, and this was the discussion we had yesterday when we talked about brands. I mean, if you look at Facebook, we use Facebook, and Facebook is the brand. If somebody has a copy of Facebook, we discount it right away. Now, but your shrimps from Vietnam, if somebody copies shrimps from Vietnam, they can do this anytime. And somebody has shrimps from next neighbor country, then it feels like, they're probably equally good. It has no brand. And so one of the things we were discussing, how would we actually do that? Maybe we would rename the shrimps in Viet shrimps or something like that, so that it is very distinctive. These are the shrimps from Vietnam, and they cannot be copied because they become a brand. So you can brand pretty much anything and everything. But branding, and that's another key learning, is something where the Western world is completely superior over the Eastern world. I mean, there's gazillions of products from Asia, primarily from China, from Japan, from India, and so forth. But they're all non-branded. They may have a company name somewhere, but they never developed a brand. Proud of this product with the brand name XYZ and so forth. Associate stories around the brand and so forth. you don't develop a brand, you'll be immediately replaced by something else if somebody comes up with a similar idea and replaces you. Because the people who buy the product wouldn't even know that they come from XYZ, whatever the brand is. I'll give you an example. In the past 100 years, I mean the early days of the Industrial Revolution, people were extremely proud of the technology they developed. So the jet engine, which I just realized when I started to research all this a couple of months ago, was developed in France. I didn't know. Did anybody of you know this is the jet engine is actually a French product? No, right? And I didn't even find out who developed it. I mean, in a company, there was a name who was the engineer who developed it, but there was no company associated. So nobody actually, theoretically, at least from the marketing point of view, owns this amazing development. Facebook, we know, because there is a brand associated with social media based, community system where you do this and this and this and that. It's simply Facebook. We still buy Mercedes, and Mercedes is one of the old companies that managed to keep up their brand. I mean, when we're very, very, very honest, the Volkswagen, which is sort of the lowest key brand in Germany, and Mercedes, the top brand, today, I mean, from a quality point of view, and everything what stands for Mercedes, Volkswagen does as well. But still Mercedes is Mercedes, because they manage their brand better than anybody else. And so, I can only urge you, when you start doing whatever you do, whatever your startup is, think of the brand, which is key importance for the success in the future. No brand, success is very limited. You are immediately be copied, and not only be copied, but rightfully be even replaced, because the market wouldn't even know that you are the one who actually created and developed it and further developed. And typically, the ones who is creating a product does not need to fear competition at all. And I come to this a little bit later. But what's your brand? So, the consequence of all this is a list of things that startups should really consider. A startup gets cash, money, investment, whatever the name should be, when they fulfill this list. I think it's 11 or 10 topics, and I'm not a friend of counting even numbers or so. So, when investors look at a business, and this is true for every investor around the world and for every business, they look at certain characteristics. And when they find the characteristics, they invest. Now, I learned while we stood here that Vietnamese investors may be not very inclined to invest in startups. And the saying goes, they're conservative and so forth. You find that very same reason for not investing in the rest of the world. And the US investors would not invest in Vietnamese startups because it's not really attractive for them. And the reason is not that you're stupid or not good or whatever, but you have not had the chance yet to go through this entire process of entrepreneurship that makes the company that makes the company attractive to invest. Maybe this is okay. I will, even if you put it over there, I will probably hit it. So, if I run through this real quick, a bold vision. A bold vision is not that you have gigantic revenue and gazillions of users and you have a black tower and you sit on the top in the 50th floor, it's all glass. I mean, this is a vision entrepreneurs have for themselves, and this is also cool. But the vision is actually, how will your business have an impact to the society where you sell it to? What will be the amazing things in the next 10 years for your customers? How will the industry change over the next 10 years? How will technology change? How will regulations change? How will maybe governments introduce new rules and so forth? It's not easy, and my first 2 companies, I didn't do it in that depth. It was in Silicon Valley when my investor said, actually you have to do that. This is just the way we work. We want to know what your ultra big picture is of this business. And you know, the very obvious answer, I mean, I didn't say it, but because I knew this would be a bad answer. But internally, you know, the brain says, gosh, you have no idea. I mean, 10 years, this is 2028 from now. We know how rapidly things evolve. How could we know? Well, we have to know, and I will talk about some tricks. So I don't go through the list right now because we will talk about the individual elements going forward. So these are basically the main topics, and I want to start with sort of the sad news. 90% of startups fail. That would mean we have here, I think, 20 or so. 18 would not make it and 2 would make it. That is really bad. The good news is that if you are in a very good accelerator type environment or have a mentor who has been successful as an entrepreneur themselves, the same number ramps up to 50%. So one learning is work with somebody who made it, who did it, and can simply help. And if that somebody is really good, then he tells you the same story like I said. You know, everything I say, take it with a grain of salt. You will do different things because you will conquer not an existing market, you will develop a new market with new products. And so, you know, like people told me, Axel, this is impossible. You know, this was impossible. The distribution was impossible. The investment platform was impossible. When I told people what I'm doing right now, most people say again, Axel, come on. I mean, you did great stuff. Why don't you relax? Go on the beach. You know, your idea is crazy. You can't change the world. That you'll help startups across the world to learn things. Yeah, it seems impossible, but I still think it's good, and give it a try. So, reasons are, oops, sorry, this is too fast. Fuzzy vision, it starts right there. Now imagine, if you say, well, this is what you're doing, and in the next couple of years it will probably be greater. How many of the top talents would you actually win as a co-founder? It would be tough. But if you can tell them a big picture, a bold idea for the next 10 years, how you change the world, and if this is plausible because you did intense research, whether this actually may work or not, well, people may say, wow, that is interesting, I want to join you. If you want to have an investor and tell them a story that blows them out of their socks, like we said, and there's some, you know, plausibility in there, they may say, well, these kind of kids may be able to do that. And you do this with customers and so forth. The vision of your company, and the clearer the better, is the first major step. Getting funding, getting top talents, getting super partner, getting first customers, and so forth. Weak founders team. And the big question is, what is weak? The biggest weakness of a founders team is if all founders are the same. 3 founders, all engineers, is a very weak team. Because none of the engineers would be typically, because the way the brain is wired, very extroverted, run around in the market, try to sell it, try to introduce a new product to everybody around there, and so forth. And the opposite, 3 business people who have this major idea and say, well, none of us is technically very savvy, but maybe we can outsource it. That would be the worst case. Or we can hire some engineers who do it. That's still very bad. Because only when the business brain and the engineering brain or technology brain or the subject matter expert brain, this can be, you know, the fish expert or so, if these two sit together, then there comes something extraordinary out of it. And if it's not, then we call it a weak team. If a business person thinks, they think differently than an engineering person. We know that the brain is different between these major types. We all don't know exactly why and what happens in the details, but that the combination of those two is extremely important. And initially I was this tech guy, so to speak, and my first partner was the business guy. And honestly, there are conflicts, but we made very quickly one very wise decision. Whenever we have a conflict with, we fight about it. But when we fight only in the interest of the company. Not personal, not ego, not, well, I need to show my power or something like that. I don't want to look stupid and so forth. It must be in the interest of the company, and we remind us of that when we feel that the discussion goes in the wrong way. And this was extremely helpful. Slow on execution. So we will talk about an execution timeline, but in Silicon Valley, when you start, you have your first idea, and you're determined to make this happening. And you start to talk to first investors, they will tell you all the same. Okay, in 6 months, you have your product in the market. And you tell all of you will tell the same answer, this is impossible. And they will tell you, no, it is possible. We developed an enterprise application, software as a service application back in the old days. And my investor says the same thing. Axel, okay, so what's your timeline? Yeah, I mean, we need about a year for development, maybe 1.5, and da da da. And he said, no way. You must be in the market in 6 months. And I told him this is not possible. I mean, just the structure, the database construct, I mean, the minimum things that we need to do is not possible in 6 months. And he said, okay, then you are on your own, but you know, anybody else will tell you the same thing. And I sat down with my engineers and they said the same thing. You can't do that. And sure enough, in 6 months, we were in the market, we got the funding, and we realized very different paradigms between Silicon Valley and the rest of the world. But speed of execution is where Californian companies basically beat the rest of the world. But not because they're smarter or more educated or have a different brain or different DNA. It's purely the investors who kick your ass, excuse my language, and understanding that it is actually possible. So there was a startup in Switzerland, and they made a new baby food. I mean, baby food in a new way. Baby food is produced through high thermal pasteurization, very much like milk, and so it's ultra heat for a split second. So all the germs go down. Unfortunately, also the vitamins and everything else. And so they put vitamins. I mean, HIP and Aleti and Nestle and whoever produces baby food puts vitamins back into that product, basically artificially, but that's the only way it works. So they come up an idea to make it with high pressure, and it worked. And so they told us when they came to the accelerator, but this was in 2016, in 2019, the product may be ready. In 2020, we go into the market. In 2022, we will be in a couple of markets in Switzerland, and in 2023, we go international. They won the business plan competition with that business plan. And I said, okay guys, this is cool, but I want to work with you on a very different timeline. The timeline is revenue still in 2016, production in 2017 and in markets in Switzerland. 2018 you are international, so there's a 5-year collapse of your timeline from 7 or 8 years or what it was to 3 years. And obviously the same argument, this is impossible, this is physically impossible. We couldn't even get the licenses because it's food to do all this and so on. And I told the same story, you know, how it works in other countries or particularly in Silicon Valley. Now, the company did the first revenue putting their baby food not in a cup like they planned to, because just pressing the cups would have taken too long. but in a plastic zipper bag with a pen written on it, what's in this bag. And obviously they couldn't sell it to a normal consumer, but they could sell it to a kindergarten. And so, because people were so excited about the technology they're using, about the product and the freshness, so they even purchased it in this bag. And they said, this is embarrassing. And I said, yes, it is embarrassing. But you know what? You just won 3 years of your life cycle of the company. And they said, yeah, it's true, and da da da. And then next year, they actually were in the markets. And then in 2018, last year, they went to Germany and Austria, this year to France. And so, we met actually 2 weeks ago. And he came back again and said, you know, the timeline, that was the thing that they just could not believe this is even furthest possible. And I said, you know what, now I can be honest, I didn't know either. Because, I mean, it was, the food is a different beast. But it worked out still in that timeline. And so this is something I would like to brand in your brain. Speed is more important than perfection. Perfection is something that is the biggest enemy of a startup. And it's kind of weird because what you try to do rightfully, you shouldn't actually change this totally, you try to deliver extraordinary quality. And perfection and quality are two different things. If you go to a McDonald's, who thinks McDonald's has the best food ever? Nobody, right? Who thinks this is really bad food? A few, okay. Who thinks when you buy a Big Mac or whatever burger that this is, that you had in mind what you want, but you get something totally different? Not really, right? Because they completely fulfill your expectation. You cannot argue this is really good or bad. You can say, I don't like it and therefore I don't buy it. But how many have eaten recently some sort of McDonald's burger type food? Probably, not so much, okay. but those who do, they argue, yeah, I know it's junk food, but still, you know, I kind of like it. So the burger is probably not healthy, maybe it isn't even, I don't really know, I don't want to judge it. But it actually is what they say it is, and you get what you expect from them. Now this is the most important trick for startups. If you go out with a prototype, you hate to do that because it's buggy, it doesn't work 100%, it may break, there are certain features that are not working yet, and therefore you don't want to go into the market. Why is that? Because in your brain, and only in your brain, the full feature set is already listed. Now assume you hit this from the market, from the customers, and you tell the customers, this is a prototype that has one feature, and only one feature, and it does something that you've never seen in the market. Don't expect that it does this and this and this and that as well. And here's a list of all the bugs that may happen. Guess what? They will say, okay, I still want to try it. Would they come back that these features that you already listed, that they are bad or not working, come back and say, hey, this is crap, this is all not working? No, because they know it. You told them, this is not working, this one thing is working, and the other things will come in the future. Completely setting the expectation is one of the tricks to go with an early product into the market before anybody else. Now, one thing is important to know that only so-called early adapter customers are ready for something like that. An early adapter is typically a user either on the tech side or even on the consumer side who can't wait for something really cool and new, and they want to get their hands dirty right away, whatever it is. And the less early adapters, or the more conservative users, they would rather choose to wait until it's all ready, and then they waste their time, so to speak, with playing around. So the other thing to learn is look for early adapter customers first, and ignore everybody else. doesn't matter how attractive a company may look like, because somebody, we call them tire kickers, they're talking to all kinds of people. Oh yeah, this is interesting, and tell me a little bit more. Don't waste your time with those. But those who are eager to play with new technology, these are your ideal startup customers. Then you tell them what is all not working, and you get with a product into the market with no problem, because you told them what it is. They are the ones who want to test it, and you get something for free that you cannot buy with any money. You get advice from real users, and if you have 20 or 30 or 50 of those, you get advice from 50 early adapter users who are the most, I would say, ambitious people with a new product. They would tell you what they want. And then you choose what you actually implement. And you get a data set that you couldn't build yourself. And I remember when we did this for the first time, and our product was, because I was very experienced already in the channel business, in this indirect sales business, I knew what the channel needed. And yet I got new ideas from our customers. Our product would have looked entirely different if only I would be the driver and my team would be the builders, and we would go into the market with that product. We would not have the product that we actually had through this very early customer adoption phase. Which means, in this constellation, fast in the market, super feedback from customers, within 6 months in the market, you absolutely win. There's nobody who can beat you. Even if somebody's completely copying what you do, they cannot do it in 3 months. And these 3 months difference wouldn't even count. But you are so fast that you are the first in the market, and then you need to talk about every single moment where you have an opportunity to bring a new product. And this is how you win a market at the end of the day. And this is why these companies get funded and most other companies not. The difference is that a US investor or somebody like me would tell you straight in the head, well, this is what you have to have. A Vietnamese, a Swiss, a German, you name it, investor would probably not even be able to articulate why they don't feel kind of super motivated, because it's just one startup like thousands they see every day, So speed is an execution and traction, therefore, and it's never lack of funding. Companies, startups don't crash because they can't get funded. And it's important to understand what I'm saying with that. At the end of the day, it may be because they could not get funded, but not getting funded is not the issue. But not being ready so that funding happens is the issue. So the funding comes when I go back one more time. When this happens, funding happens. And it's very important to see that conclusion and the dependency of a very well-built startup versus a startup slapped together, and then, it will go somehow. Oh shoot, we can get funded, and then people tell you a little bit here and there, and then you start building your company around inputs from random investors. And this may actually kill your company in a different way. So become a robust startup before you even talk to investors. Now you say, well, but I don't have money. Well, you find the money from parents, from friends, from other sources, but investors. Okay? So, we do teach this, what I just teached for 4 years now. Explicitly proud, obviously, is this guy here. John is a Mexican New Yorker, and he came to the accelerator, and he was one of these weird guys. He was one of these, so he had hand-weaved leather shoes. He was Mr. Elegant, and he thought, come on, this is not an entrepreneur. He was so different than typical entrepreneurs. This guy here on the left side, Jan, I mean, he couldn't focus on what you're saying, so he you know, I was interviewing him for the accelerator, then he pulled out his cell phone, needed to talk to somebody. I mean, he was a weirdo, I mean, in any shape. Then this lady up here, Kenya Coffee, I mean, she was jumping around and she was also a weirdo. And I say that because
all entrepreneurs and improvements are weirdos.
Yeah, all entrepreneurs are weirdos. I mean, that's the story. And so don't discount your colleagues if they're strange guys. Most of them are strange one way or the other. Because they do only one thing. In their brain is only clicking my startup, my company. It's only about me. It's almost egoistic. It's almost, I mean, insane. But these guys get their companies done. And Mr. Nice Guy typically has a hard time because they're fulfilling too many expectations from too many people and lose the focus. And so if you want to be successful, focus on your thing and never ever, you know, worry what others say. And if they think you're a weirdo, yeah, you're a weirdo. And if they're thinking you're crazy, okay, you're crazy. And if they're thinking you're whatever, then you take that as well. Because only when you use your entire energy, I mean full energy, that's the way to make your company work. So, we're talking about mindset. Who was actually on the event on Thursday, where we had here 2, 1, 2, 3. Oh, not very many. Okay. I was hoping to jump through this real quick, but so I do try to be very quick. I think this one is a relevant one. Break all rules except the law. I mean, you don't break the law, period. But everything else should not stop you from doing something. Because if me, Bill Gates back then, Steve Ballmer, Steve McNeely from Sun, all these guys had the same kind of situation. What you're thinking is not possible. So, okay, maybe, maybe not, we don't know. We don't accept a rule or a situation as not possible. If we can think it, again, we can make it. Because if in our brain we have this mega capability to construct not only a thought, but also pictures. And if you can envision, this is where the vision comes from, if you can envision what you're trying to do, then there's only one thing you should do, is actually follow your vision, no matter what other people say. So, and if Travis is just a great example because the taxi market is also such an old market, it's so interwoven. I mean, there's such a mafia business that it seems to be impossible to crack. I mean, if you look at, particularly the US, I mean, the taxi business is terrible. And if somebody says, well, I cracked that business and I completely eradicate everything from new, well, this is something bold. And he did. I mean, he had, unfortunately, other problems that he was fighting. I mean, legal suits against pretty much anything and everything. I think this was a bit of too much. But these are the type of things that make amazing businesses. Teamwork is clear. Then bold communication. Let me focus on this real quick. Communication is one thing, meaning you talk about your business all day long. Particularly as a business side leader, talk about it every day. You tweet, you share, you communicate, you go on events, you talk. Whether people want to listen to you or not, you still tell them. Some may actually be interested, others not. And that makes it happen at the end of the day. If you're very careful and don't want to bother anybody and don't talk about what you do because it might be impolite and so on, that is your first big deficiency. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's what it is. I mean, we read in the news mainly bad news. I mean, there's some good news, so that it's not only bad news, but that's how news business works. But the news business didn't invent that. This is how we work in our reception mechanism. We receive bad information or for that matter, very unique information first before anything else. And bad and unique can be put in the same bucket, so to speak. So when you have unique information, and you have, because otherwise you wouldn't sit here, then communicate this every time possible. I mean, it's one of the things where we see another difference between the Western and the Eastern world. I mean, originally we were all the same cultural fabric. We were close to our chest, we didn't bother, we were obeying the structure, and we were very polite and so forth. And I don't want to say be impolite by just pounding on your message. But as a matter of fact, those who pound the message into the market will be recognized sooner or later. And if you do this intelligently, then even better. Now, if you do this very cool, then even better. And if there's a value in this communication, this is when you finally win. But it's also a learning process. You have to figure that out. You have to feel what works in your communication. But when we look into the world, we see the US #1 in terms of communication. Europe is #2, then comes Asia, and then comes really literally the rest of the world. There's no communication. I mean, communication from African, even startups or companies who are doing actually something cool, is virtually inexistent. And that's one of their biggest problems. So communication is super important, and should you have a chance to join the accelerator one day, you will see what we actually do. Timely execution we talked about, communication we talked about, globalization, leadership. This is one thing I just want to share real quick, elevating your team. So we have teams or founders coming to us presenting their technology, and the second or third slide is the team, and they're very proud of their team because they know they have extraordinary people. And that is something that should resonate with you, because if somebody comes with extraordinary people to you, no matter whether it's an investor or a customer or whatever, then you're listening much deeper versus, okay, yeah, we're all startups, I mean, we're young, we don't have experience, but we're passionate. Right? That you're passionate, this is a given, right? But when you now tell, this guy has done this, and this lady here, she made this kind of whatever in a way that we couldn't believe how cool that is. If you express your team as particularly strong, and believe it, hopefully, this is a good thing to do. And it makes your team actually more valuable. And there are leaders who push the team down in order to be further up. But that's a very bad idea, because it makes you, at the end of the day, it makes you a weak leader because you couldn't attract top-notch people. But if you can attract top-notch people, that makes you a very powerful leader. And this is where investors come in and say, wow, yeah, these guys, this is the right fabric. I thought one of the things from Mark Zuckerberg was very, very cool. He said once in an interview how he is selecting people. And he said it's actually very, very simple. After a couple minutes of conversation, I asked myself, would I work as an employee for that person? And if the answer is a yes, then I consider them. If the answer is a no, no matter what they bring, I would not go forward. So if you hire people and you feel, well, I could work for them because they're very strong, that is a good thing. Because that shows that you have, the self-confidence and the power that you would work for somebody that you actually employ. And if not, then you are looking for weaker people than you, and that's bad. And I learned this very early in my career, luckily from my mentor back then, and I understood that if I am a leader, manager, then I'm typically a generalist. And I am, I can cross a lot of topics, but I'm not a specialist. I'm not good at anything I'm talking about. I'm not really good. but I'm very good in talking about a broad space. And so I was, because of that, looking for a salesperson that is much better than me, an engineer much better than me, a finance guy much better than me, you know, a operations guy much better than me. And I found these people, and that was why pretty much everybody, if you meet my ex-employees, they would probably say, you know, I think AXEL's biggest advantage was you pull teams together you cannot believe. And so I really pounded that topic, because when you put teams together, where others say, I can't believe you could put that together, you automatically win. You can actually sit back in your chair and say, okay, these are so cool, they run the show, and I just have to watch that things are going in the right direction. And then you won. Okay? The other thing I mentioned on Thursday, which I think is crucial for every startup, is the question about followership and copying of ideas. I think the question, what can I do? I'm afraid that somebody copies my idea, is the single most often asked question I get on Quora, in events, and so forth. And I was thinking back and forth for a while when I started helping startups, but I came to this conclusion, because I knew, but I never actually expressed it that way. A leader is only a leader if they have followers. I mean, you don't lead anything or anybody if there's nobody behind, right? And if you have a company and tell the rest of the world you don't have a competition, I mean, this is instantaneously suspicious, because that means this market may not even exist. The same is with your product. If somebody copies your product, then you know you become a leader, and only then. So the problem is not that somebody may steal your idea. The worst thing is that nobody is stealing your idea. That will be terrible, believe it or not, because that would mean that the idea is probably nothing worth. But if people steal your idea in apostrophe, that means, wow, this is so cool that somebody else tries it. And you should not be afraid of it. And the reason why not, because in very short order, has to do again with communication. People will ask, oh, this is like XYZ, it's like your product or like your company. If you never communicate who you are and what you do, that effect would not happen. But assuming we learned communication is very important, so people will say, oh, okay, this is like this guy, ah, okay. And the tendency around the world, in any culture, in any country, no matter where on this planet, people go with leaders and not with followers. There are people who go with followers, always, otherwise they wouldn't exist. And these are people who have a short-term interest to have a cheap product. And let them exist, because they will exist anyway. But those who are actually having a grand idea, they will find people who love the idea, but more so, they love the understanding that when you started a new idea with whatever product you have, you will in 6 or 9 or 12 months come with the next generation of this idea. And the others will still follow you, and that's still fine, but people want to go with this leadership versus with followers, because from the leaders we can imagine that they will come with new ideas. The followers may not. They may not have the power to copy you over and over and over again, and therefore the followers are always the ones who basically pick up the crumbs, get the dirt together, but get not the big business. If you don't have followers, you will not be considered a leader. So it's very counterintuitive. It's not something where people say, oh yeah, that's not logical. I mean, once you think about it, you become to that spot, you come to that place where you think, yeah, actually, you know, I need followers. So all I'm saying is, forget the fear from being copied, let them do that, and communicate as much as you humanly can to as many people who are relevant obviously without, annoying them, but communicate your story widely, big spread, openly, explain exactly what you're doing, and don't worry if somebody will copy you. And we had a very interesting discussion once. It was about patents, whether patents will actually be gone in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Because patents prevent progress, keep things close. I think it circled around in news where there are estimated 100 million patents registered and approved sitting in some people's drawers and not doing anything. I mean, we're in a very bad situation that intellectual property that may actually benefit others are closed long back because they don't know when they may actually want to use it. In any case, don't worry about either one. Pound on getting your word out. So the takeaway is document your mindset, what we talked about earlier a little bit. What is it where you think is really important? And this may be the openness, this may be how you deal with your team, what's your leadership position, and so on. And review your leadership every day. So that was something real quick that was, I think it was also my lead investor, Sam. He said, okay, so when you work with your team, try to think in the evening for 30 seconds. Where were you a leader, and where would have you maybe, or should you, decide a little bit differently? And the difficulty of a leader is that we have two sort of areas of decision. One is, this is the direction, let's everybody, think about it, and you try to get sort of common sense from everybody and consensus to go in this direction. So this is a nice way of leading. But if it's difficult, you may need to decide that one or the other person in your team needs to go. That's one of the bad decisions you need to make, but not bad. It's actually one of these sad is the better word. But in the interest of the rest of the team, you may come to this point. And the question is, how did you do it? And you have every day critical decisions. Do we go with this customer, or is this too big, or is this not profitable enough, or is, whatever. How did I deal with this partner, with this employee, with, whatever is out there. And I found this a good thing. I mean, honestly, I didn't do it every day, but I know once in a while, and particularly then, when you're not really sure was this well handled, then you at least can reflect in the evening and say, okay, yeah. And you can go back to this person next day and say, I thought about it. Actually, sorry, I was a little bit too harsh. But I'm also under stress, so apologize, and da-da-da-da-da. And this will be received very well. Okay? So, before we make a break, real quick, a couple of words about timeline. I alluded this in the beginning, and so here it goes. This is our 6-month timeline. So we start at ground zero here. This is basically where you get your idea, and I see this is really hard to read, sorry. So this is idea validation. And idea validation means try to find out from and within the market whether your idea is really good. And there is a magical number, is 42. Those who know Hitchhiker's Guide of the Galaxy, 42 is the meaning of life. But actually this 42 is a statistical value. When you talk to 42 people about anything, then you have most likely, when you really pick random people, a very good handle on what the feedback is. So if the feedback on your idea within the first 2 or 3 months after you had the idea is positive from more than 40 people, then this is a sign to go ahead. At this point in time, you have not written code or built a prototype or anything. You have probably your whole idea maybe on 1 or 2 or 3 slides of the PowerPoint presentation. This is all you have. And here comes again this difference between one type of entrepreneur and the other. If you're shy to explain what you're planning to do and have nothing at this point yet, you naturally may not want to do that. And this is a change in behavior, and change in behavior is always hard. And you should do it, because here it decides relatively quickly whether you go forward with lots of power or still with doubt. And fortunately, I learned this in my first business where I was employed, Rockwell International, and they did stuff also on the bleeding edge. Back then, this was one of these top tech companies in the US. And because they do bleeding edge technology, they use this technique to go out to customers and ask them, what do you think if we would do that? And they literally did not have anything other than, and back then it was not even PowerPoint because it didn't exist. It was basically a couple of paper sheets where the idea was sort of constructed, and they got the feedback. And after 42 business positive feedbacks, they thought, oh well, okay, there are companies in this case who may want to buy it, so let's deep dive. Now the next is, I have to look at myself, is vision, right? Yeah, vision.